right, so I'm demonstrating paper exploration collage stuff. And so I have just a huge variety of things that I have cut up, that I found from magazines. Some of this is wallpaper, got obviously like a flower here. So when I do this in class, I really encourage my students to be kind of impulsive about their selections. When they're looking for imagery, I tell them to look for things like textures and colors. Don't worry so much about what I would say is objective imagery. Maybe a few of those examples would be good. So like I pulled this from an encyclopedia. It's something that I really enjoy doing. I like going through old encyclopedias. So here we've got Sir Isaac Newton. I kind of colored on him with some Sharpies just to have some fun with that. Big interest in science, and so here I've got some Galileo stuff as well. I think I have a Picasso, yeah. So this is going to be some of my objective imagery. And then I've got this this print that I've made repeatedly. I like Roman statues, and so this is Aphrodite of Cyrene. So my aesthetic I allowed that to influence my selections. So I'm going to take my objective stuff and I'm going to move it off to the side. So this is kind of like my version of what I call cheap and easy paper making. If you've never done paper making, it can be a laborious and time exhaustive process. And as such, I've kind of developed this thing, this method. So when I was interviewing, go ahead and get that ready, Cal Mahan for this project, one of my artist friends who is really, really inspiring to me. He said that a lot of his work was about paper making, and he does that, like if that's a thing for him. And I thought there's no way we can really do that at a distance, and it's gonna be difficult and again, kind of a time thing for us to do that here in class. And so I thought, all right, what I'll go ahead and do is I'll do something that was sort of an adaptation from an elementary project that I used to teach where we made fake stained glass. So I showed the students like different examples of stained glass, cathedrals, just really beautiful rosettes, things like that. And then what I gave them was a piece of wax paper, right? And then they tore up a whole bunch of tissue paper. And then I cut up a bunch of these black construction paper leading things because I didn't want the students to have to worry about cutting super straight. So they just had a huge selection of these straight things. And so they drew on the back of their wax paper and then they placed these in and they put some glue water over the top of it. So I thought, well, if this worked pretty well and it's similar to the way that Cal makes his paper, where he gets a lot of different paper samples together and he stacks them up, I thought, well, let's try this. So this is kind of like my prototype here. It took one day to dry. I made a tray with aluminum foil, and then I used various construction papers, collage materials, things like that to build this thing up. Some tissue paper, some wallpaper samples, just anything that I've collected, right? So here's the way I do that. I just fold this in half, aluminum foil, try to use the dull side. It seems to stick less. And then what I do is I create basically like kind of a box or a trough to hold it. And so I fold up the sides. This is kind of similar to the origami box that I teach a lot of times. And then I fold these other elements over here. Now, some of my students have done really cool shapes in here. Like, you don't have to do a rectangle. I had maybe 2 or 3 of my students here in my physical class that took like a circular template and wrapped it over like the bottom of a bucket. And then that way they made their handmade paper, which I'm requiring for the project, as part of the collage into a circular thing. So it's kind of a cool way to be creative. I encourage experimentation as much as possible with this. And I don't want you to think too hard about this paper making thing. It's more important that you just go for it and let it dry and let it go. When you're doing the corners on this, I just kind of like fold them over and pinch them. Usually that does a pretty good job, okay? So I've got several different, like I said earlier, pieces of paper that I'm working with. To make this strong, it's usually a good idea to apply like larger pieces of construction paper back here because the construction paper like really allows glue to saturate in. So it's more about strength back here than it is about like necessarily background, and then we build up from there. Cal Mahan, when he does this stuff, he does a lot of things where he makes his own collage papers. And so like I took this piece of paper here and some just gold paint, and I kind of spread it all over to make my own collage paper as such. So I like some of the gold and I do want to keep it to where I can see it, but I think I'm just going to start by applying some of these pieces of paper in here just to kind of give me a good start. Think paper mache when you're doing this, if you've never done that before. The strongest structures in paper mache have a lot of little pieces going several directions. It's kind of like the concept of reinforced concrete, right? You got rebar that goes through it, so you've got this support network. So this will work pretty well to get me started. Then I make a water and glue solution. So this is about 50-50 water, 50-50 water and glue. So you don't want like straight Elmer's glue. It's just not going to dry as translucent as you want it to. Sometimes you won't see your imagery very well, but you know, I just kind of like a rough estimate. So the first thing I do is I kind of pour some of that just all over the place because I want to get a good base for this, right? I'm going to get a brush real quick, but you don't necessarily need a brush. A lot of times I just get my fingers in there and again, kind of treat it like a flat paper mache thing because I want strength on the back. You could even use just typing bond paper, you know, like regular printer paper if you wanted to. I like to make sure that it's on both sides, and so I flip it over and I kind of spread it all out, especially my thicker papers like this gold paper. It's like a pretty nice watercolor paper. Just want to make sure there's lots of glue on there. Then I'm going to start building my base for this. And you'll see the glue pooling in certain areas, and that's fine. The idea is that you're going to lay paper in there and absorb that. And again, don't overthink this thing, right? This is just kind of like a start to the project. Then we're going to use this in addition to other media and techniques to create a fine art collage. Of course, in the end of this unit, you will be coming up with ideas on how you could appropriate this to maybe a lesson, right? You're not writing a full-on lesson plan though. Looks like I need to get some of this glue over here. Okay. So be creative, right? Found objects. You see stuff on the ground, bend over, pick it up if it looks cool, right? I really want to see what kind of stuff you try out, how it works, if it doesn't work, right? I mean, that's really what art is about. These media techniques have, you know, they're not like they just existed and Cal was like, oh, I'll just do this because I learned this. He experiments ritualistically like I do. And that's really important to learning new ideas. Okay, what else do I got here? Okay, yeah, so like when I was searching for imagery, again, I wasn't so worried about like subject matter as I was about texture. I really thought this was kind of a cool thing, like with all these people in here. So I'm going to just think about that more texture-wise. I got this out of a National Geographic magazine. Let's kind of throw some texture back here, kind of thing. Okay. This one I thought was really cool too. I'm probably going to use this to build up and create some other ideas. What is this, like a, it's like an infrared image of like a geyser. So I'm going to hang on to that for just a bit. I've also got all these like little plates that I found in a Better Homes and Gardens magazine. I think now I'll go ahead and start kind of building some imagery. I'm going to start with my Aphrodite because I don't really want to draw a lot of attention to her. I kind of want her to be a background thing. And so because she's absorbing a lot of that glue from underneath, it's kind of starting to curl up. So I've got to make sure that I brush extra glue water over the top. And sometimes these papers will buckle, but once they're dry, they'll flatten out pretty well. So we're going to drop her in there. And it looks like since this edge is popping up, I'm going to have to add some other things to that. So kind of wanted to do a little bit of weaving action with this. So I like the texture of weaving, so I cut a bunch of these little pieces here. And I'm just gonna start by like sticking 2 of them together. I'm gonna kind of lay them down. I'm gonna take some of my blues here and kind of go one over and then one under, which is honestly, it's a good practice for students. It's good for finger dexterity and for them to like discover ways of making patterns. I like it because of the linear effect. And so these are just pieces of old wallpaper that I found at the thrift store. So I'm gonna go over, under, and I gotta pull this boy up, go over that one. And then the blue and the red stuff that I have here, I guess mostly blue, that's a collage paper that I made by painting on a piece of paper. So let's see, this is gonna have to go under this one. So again, I encourage you just to work intuitively, you know, have fun with the process. That's one thing you'll see in Cal's, in the interview that I did with him. I was like, what's your motivating factor? And he said, just to have fun. I mean, art making should be fun. Shouldn't be this stressful, like super serious thing. If you want to try something fun out, try it out. I'm just gonna kind of weave a little bit more here. Kind of get some of those elements. And I'm not gonna see all these, you know, eventually I'll cover some of this stuff up. But think about your personality a little bit, right? If you're a really kind of neat and tidy person, you might have way less chaos going on like I have. I'm certainly not a neat and tidy person, so I'm allowing this to belie my personality to some degree. Pull those up, lay those down, do those things. And I'm not gonna use everything, right, that I've selected and capped, but I may use them in the final product. So as you're searching for stuff that you wanna use in your mixed media collage, let's see, yeah, over under. You know, you find something that's compelling, there's a reason why it drew your eye, right? So collect those things. You never know when they might come in handy. So, okay, I think I'm just gonna do one more of these to kind of get a good background thing going. And again, you don't have to use my techniques here. I'm just like throwing some techniques in here that I know work and things that I enjoy looking at. Come on, buddy, there we go. Smooth that out. All right, awesome. Okay, so I think I like to maybe top this off with some of these little plate design thingies. Kind of get that maybe floating up into this area here. I'm gonna tear some of these off just to kind of get some reference in other spots. If I see that there's like a thin spot where there's not a lot of paper in there, I'll just build it up to where there is, because you don't want it to be weak. Okay, so it's gonna get really busy here with all this subject matter, so I may go ahead and just get rid of some of it. I like the Galileo thing, or rather the Sir Isaac Newton thing in here, so I'm gonna go ahead and hide that kind of spot right there. Just kind of get him next to that and over some of those woven things. Probably need to add a little bit more glue to the top of this. It's important to make sure there's glue on top. And we poured all that glue, you know, over, and it's over everything, so it's under everything, so it's gonna create a nice strong handmade paper. And I'm just gonna throw some threads in here. I found these really cool threads here, again at the thrift shop. That was one of Cal's secrets that he told me. He was like, go to the thrift shop often and don't buy stuff just because you may think it has a function. Buy stuff because it appeals to you visually. And a lot of his stuff is stuff that he just literally found, you know, blowing down the street. Other people might have thought it was trash. But I really love the sparkly business in here happening. So I'm just carefully kind of gluing that down. I don't want it to move too much, but you know, if it does, it does. In the end, it's gonna come out. I think it's gonna come out really well. Okay, let's see here. I want to get a little bit of this infrared action. So I don't really have like a lot of this red. So I think I'm gonna use some of that for like a border up here. Kind of like how that frames over the top. So I'm gonna put a little bit more glue on there. And you know, when you have stuff on here you like and you don't want to cover it up, well, don't cover it up. Okay, I want to get some flower petals in here. I don't even know how these are gonna hold up, you know. Hopefully they keep their color and don't begin deteriorating right away. But I just want to see what happens. So let's see a good spot for that. Stick that over here. I'm probably gonna have to pour some extra glue on there just to try to get that to flatten out. Another thing that I want to do with this unit is doing some flower pressing and some nature pressing stuff, because that can be a really beautiful collage element as well. Kind of get this dude down here, a little sculptural action, pour a little bit more of that glue over the top there. Hopefully that'll hold. So again, I don't know how it'll come out, but I'm not really too concerned about it. I just want to see what works and what doesn't work. There we go. That's gonna hold down pretty well. Okay, pretty busy at this point. I think I like what's going on. I'm kind of a playful artist, so I'm probably gonna throw some googly eyes up in there just to make it kind of fun. Okay, what else? Oh yeah, kind of like to do like a little confetti stuff. So I'll take like little pieces of this, colorful, and just allow these things to fall. I don't know, that violet's not very vibrant though, it's not very fun. This yellow might be kind of nice since I've got some yellow already going with the daffodil pieces. I just kind of like the particulate nature of this, all these little spots, pieces going all over the place. But I don't want to cover up too much of my subject matter and imagery. I like that pretty well. Let's see. What else do I want to add? I feel like it kind of needs a border down here. So I'm going to use some of these pieces that I cut. I cut these with an X-Acto knife, so they were really, really sharp and clean. Cal likes to use a paper cutter to get really clean stuff going on. But I like the way that a border kind of like shows us, okay, this is the edge of this collage element. So that can be really helpful when composing later. Oh, Picasso, I'm gonna have to work you into another piece, I guess, buddy. And let's see, maybe one more of those guys. Stick that over here just to kind of give a little bit more reinforcement. Okay, so what you wanna do with this, when you're done, you're happy with your results, you wanna let it dry for at least a day. You wanna lay it flat on something. What I do is I place like a piece of paper underneath of it sometimes just to kind of catch any glue that might go through the cracks. But what we did in class was we just put all of these on one big piece of cardboard. We did this yesterday and they're almost all dry. So you might want to check it and make sure that everything is dry. You should start to see your imagery pretty clearly through this glue water, and you'll know that it's dry at that point. So you shouldn't have huge puddles of glue. You should put enough imagery and just stuff in here to where you kind of have like a good ratio of glue to paper. Like it should be able to soak in pretty well. So I look forward to seeing what y'all come up with on this. I'm gonna go through real quick kind of how to peel this off. So pull this back and I'll grab one of the ones that I prepared. So this is what we're looking for. We want to see that there's not glue still on the surface. It should be like a little bit crispy. What I do is I peel these back and I just put a fan over it to kind of finish it off. And then the trick here is, let's see. So I got this little guy pulling up here, so that's gonna be a good spot for me to start. Maybe a little bit wet yet. The trick is to try to get the aluminum foil off of here in one area, and then you can begin peeling it back from the back. and it's gonna come off in pieces. There we go. So you gotta be kind of careful with this, right? And if something like comes off, well, it's collage, right? We'll just glue it back on later. Oh, like that. Missed that little gold piece. So I ended up putting some grass in here that I found out on campus. So I think that's gonna do pretty well. It looks like it soaked up the glue pretty well. And then these leaves here, I really soaked those with glue because I want them to keep their color. But we'll see what happens, right? Experimentation. But you do want to get all that foil off the back because we're going to be adhering these to like a sturdier base. And what you could do if you wanted to is make several of these, small ones, big ones, different shaped ones. And maybe that's going to be something that you use more than some of the other techniques in your collage. So you're creating a fine work of art here. Something that shows your experimentation of paper media. Oh, this does not want to come off. I might have to use an X-Acto knife on this. Yeah. Oh, I think it's coming. There we go. And you'll know if it's not dry, right? Because you're not going to be able to pull it off very well. So now I've got a couple of these things that I can work with and get them into like a larger collage sensibility. So good luck, have fun. I look forward to seeing what you come up with.